On today's review, we're going back to Damn, which I actually reported an album review based on this album when it first released in 2017. I didn't really do it much justice. You can go see it, but in all fairness, it was an old video. I didn't really do it much justice. And we're gonna go back to the album, but a lot of people have been dissecting this album. A lot of people have been giving their takes on this album. It's probably the most talked about album of the last 3 years. It's won a Pulitzer Prize, for crying out loud. But what I feel like a lot of people are not talking about is from this angle where I personally believe that this album is a commentary on America and whether it can grow or not.
You have to give us a straight answer too. Don't try to give us no.
I'm gonna give you a straight answer.
Yeah, man. Don't be a politician.
I'm gonna give you a straight answer.
You want to number them 1 through?
He could just tell us in case he wants to number them.
Uh-oh.
There you go.
That's the order right there?
Yes.
From which way to which way, though?
This way to that way.
From Section 80 on?
Section 80 on that way.
This is being the best.
We are going to discuss this concept with 3 important tracks that we're going to use, which is Blood, DNA, and XXX. So let's begin. Also, for this narrative, I will not be considering America in reverse order. I will not be looking at this album, what it would sound like in a reverse order as well. So I'm going to go dive into this album right now. Before we look into this, let's actually break down Blood. Let's look at Blood for what it is. On this album, I've noticed that Beacon is actually used as a symbolic character where he represents where he introduces allegory. Of course, that's what I think his character is. You can also argue that he's also an indirect that is also an indirect characterization, but I personally feel that he is more of a symbolic one because he's the one that actually introduces allegories. We'll talk about that a lot more later on. But he introduced this allegory to us on Blood. The proof that this is an allegory can be seen where Beacon says, is it wickedness, is it weakness? You decide. Are we gonna live or die? This presents us with the idea that this isn't gonna be your conventional track. And then from then on, Kendrick goes on to deliver a very cryptic verse. He actually introduces a woman who is characterized as blind, and she is also frantically pacing up and down. Up and down the sidewalk, and then Kendrick goes up to ask this woman if she would like some help. Kendrick also says that this woman appears to have lost something. Nonetheless, he goes on to ask this woman if she wants some help finding whatever she has lost, and then the woman said, "I have lost something. You've lost your life." The woman is actually a symbol for America. Like she represents the Statue of Liberty as well as Lady Justice. Lady Justice by the virtue that she is blind. The reason why I say this is America is because the woman is walking up and down, frantic, looking like as if she's lost something. To me, this comes across to me as identity crisis. The reason why I say it's identity crisis because when you're going through an identity crisis, from what I've noticed from experiences itself, you tend to make knee-jerk reactions, which is why she ended up shooting Kendrick. Her being blind also has a double-fold meaning. Not only does it suggest that she is also Lady Justice, of course, if you look outside the courtroom, you'll see a blind woman holding a scales and a knife. But not only does the blindness personify her, but it also presents us with the idea that this woman is also ignorant to her surroundings, her environment. I actually came across a paper by Chris Durante in 2013, who has a PhD in ethics, who actually discusses the topic of identity crisis in much length. In the sense of Chris Durante though, his identity crisis came when he was comparing his younger self to his older self and trying to wonder where he was gonna go. To help resolve this kind of identity crisis, what he turned to was the argument that was brought about in the 500 BC to 400 BC by Heraclitus and Plato. And what he was talking about on the paper a lot was basically expounding more on the ship paradox theory. It basically argues that if a ship was to be fully assembled and set on course into the river and say let's say something goes wrong and it needs repairing, is that ship now a new ship because something new has been added to it, or is it still the old ship? Now, this idea that was introduced by Heraclitus was as follows. It says, upon those who step into the same rivers, different and again different waters flow. So this essentially means that if you step into the same river and you leave, no matter what happens within that river, you're still going to be essentially the same person. You're not going to change over time, which this suggests that there is no identity over a certain period of time. You are born a certain way and you're going to die with a certain way with the same characteristics, etc. This view, if was applied into what we're talking about today in terms of damn, is seeming to paint the idea that America is doomed. It's kind of, this is the makeup of America, in which we see it as injustice all through. There is no real room for hope, and no matter what waters may hit or what turbulence may hit it, no matter what it may go through as a nation, it will still essentially be the same nation. This is what the Heraclitus views is presenting to us. However, there is the opposing view of the Lockeans, which was in 1632 on to 1704, if I'm not mistaken. The Lockeans proposed that, however, our identity is shaped by our memories, not necessarily us going through time and time again. It is heavily dependent on psychological factors that make up our identity. There is also the fact that we also have to remember who we are in order to have a firm grasp of who our identity was. Simply put, we cannot remember necessarily the parts of our childhood, meaning that those parts of our childhood is now dead and buried. If this is in the same context as America, it actually paints a more hopeful picture, in the sense that if they can remember the values that they stood for, they can actually grow further to become a more wholesome nation. And this view, the Lockean view, in my opinion, is what I feel identifies more with this album. Let's say, for example, you have an amnesia, for example, right? You have amnesia, meaning a complete memory loss. You do not remember who you are. According to Lockean's view, you are actually a completely new person, because you cannot actually remember essentially who you are as a person. You cannot remember exactly what you stand for, what your name is, etc. This is how amnesia works. So even though everyone else remembers you for a certain idea, remembers you in a certain way, or remembers your name, remembers who you are, if you cannot remember who you are, you basically have no identity to give off, and you're essentially a new person. So in this kind of view, this gives us the idea that if America was to go through some kind of iconoclasm within this album, then it forgets its whole identity. Now, DNA is a track about Kendrick Lamar's DNA and about Kendrick Lamar's being. However, there are a couple of lines that I've noticed that could be attributed to America as well, especially in the first verse, because I feel like the first verse is more between America and Kendrick, or without my own interpretation, a certain enemy of some sort against Kendrick. Before the breakdown, in which Gerardo Rivera recites his Fox News line again, it seems like Kendrick was going back and forth with this enemy. Now, of course, for the purpose of this review, the enemy is America. So I'm going to go through a couple of lines to give you a proper idea of what I'm talking about here. The line where Kendrick says, "I got millions, I got riches building in my DNA." This again can be seen as Kendrick, but boasting, but at the same time, this also seems to be like America bragging, because again, if we look at America today, they do have the highest GDP, they do have a lot of Fortune 500 companies all there. Amazon is there, Jeff Bezos is there. Jeff Bezos, fun fact, is actually worth the same net worth as Hungary. That's a nation consisting of 10 million people. You have one man in America worth that much. This might be Kendrick saying that he's got millions building in his DNA, but we can also see America being fit in this verse as well. I will admit, these two examples that I provided, they are kind of on the weak side, but however, the next line that I do have does serve to not only remove Kendrick from the equation, but it also puts America right into the forefront. Here it is. Yes, I've got dark. It says, "I got dark, I got evil that rot inside my DNA." This could not be talking about Kendrick, because I would like to know what the dark and the evil is talking about. It could be a reference onto the Kendrick Lamar that killed someone when he was 16, as he said on Mad City. This could also be a reference onto K-Dot before he became Kendrick Lamar. But I personally think that this is talking about America, because the reference here is too poignant. An article by Doddy V actually detailed the slaughter of the Native Americans as well as the slave trade, but mainly the slaughter of the Native Americans, in which it actually noted it as the Great American Holocaust, where a lot of Native Americans were killed to take over the land. That is some evil stuff. And then you also have slavery as well. Again, that's some evil stuff. I do not think that Kendrick is attributing, not these scenarios, but whatever Kendrick may be attributing to himself, I personally feel like America fits this verse a lot more. To really capitalize on this idea, we really have to look at the transitioning points as well as the words that were being used before reaching the bridge in which Eduardo Rivera brings forth his Fox News views and comments on hip-hop. So before we reach that, we had 3 poignant lines that actually stood out to me. These few but important lines represents the breakdown between the enemy and Kendrick Lamar, or in this case, the enemy being America and Kendrick Lamar. So the lines goes as follows. When it says backbone don't exist, born outside a jellyfish I gauge. A lot of people has broken this down into him going into rappers, but I personally think that this is talking about America in a nutshell, simply because of the fact that you can actually liken this into being how America gotten its wealth, the wealth that he was boasting about earlier, which I alluded to was also America. This is possibly him making a passing commentary on how he got it through the backs of others. In fact, the article by Davidi, in which I mentioned earlier, actually goes into this and details it as the Great American Holocaust. I'm going to link it into the description so that you can go off and read on your own. However, this history is very important for to actually highlight, because this is one of the causes for the identity crisis, because we're being fed two narratives. America is being two-faced, as Kendrick is presenting here, or as I'm breaking him down to be presenting here, in my own opinion. And finally, the line where it says, "Select the truth when the prophets say," I do not see this applying any more than to America. The prophets goes into the Bible, and the Bible has always prophesied of Babylon the Great, from Daniel onto the book of Revelation, also Jeremiah as well as Ezekiel. They all talk about this nation. A lot of theologians, a lot of Rastafarians also call this place as Babylon the Great. So yeah, this is another clue pointing to America being the antagonist to Kendrick Lamar's character in verse 1, in which he goes against in verse 2. After the bridge, of course. And of course the bridge does give off a lot more, which is the Herod Rivera comment, who is an American citizen who works for Fox News, which is again an American media company. Again, you can kind of piece together why I really believe that DNA serves as a commentary on America. Now, moving on from DNA, that piece of history was very key, because XXX actually goes through this and it actually brings this video to a full circle. Now, before we go into that, XXX, in my honest opinion, appears more as an allegorical of a track. It appears more as a satire or a non-canon track in respect of the whole album. The reason why I say this is because both Beacon and Kid Capri appears on this. We already went into when Beacon actually appears on this. His role is to deliver allegories. He's done that on Pride. Now that topic deserves its own video. But not just Beacon appears on this, Kid Capri also appears on this. Kid Capri, I have also noticed to be a character within this universe that tends to signal a narrative change. He appears on Year to shift the narrative to a spiritual narrative. He appeared again on Element to change it to a physical narrative, and now he appears again to shift it back to a spiritual narrative. Now, for the track XXX, by the virtue of the name alone XXX, we can speculate that this is a non-canonical entry onto this album. XXX was the only track that actually highlighted the flaws of both the antagonist and the protagonist. Allow me to explain, especially when Kendrick Lamar uses the line, "But is America honest or do we bask in sin?" This line is very poignant because he actually openly admits his own hypocrisies, especially with the fact that he advised his friend that if someone from his family line, although understandable, getting killed, he would also take the gun and go and kill in retaliation. Hypocritically, he actually goes up to talk about gun control. We see Kendrick say to the antagonist here in this case, saying, "It's nasty when you set us up, then roll the dice to bet us up." Now, this alludes to America, especially going back into what we talked about DNA, about the drugs being brought into the black neighborhoods. This is him making yet another reference to that. The one thing that Kendrick does say that does cap off this to be America itself is by calling out America in its own name. He goes on to say, "America is a reflection of me, that's what a mirror does." Now, when he says America is a reflection of me, that's what a mirror does, it seems to send home the message, to at least according to me, it sends home the message that America is a people and not necessarily a place. That for a people, for what's happening, America as a people is going through a sense of identity crisis. Now, with this idea that America is a people and not a place, we can now start to look at the hypocrisies that's being presented. There is no doubt racist everywhere. There's no doubt racist in America, and this is kind of the point that Kendrick is trying to get at, because the only reason America is racist is because of the racism that's within the nation. Hochschild wrote a paper that actually highlighted the hypocrisies of the American dream, and which basically goes into how much it's a lie, highlighting 3 important tenets that the American dream holds. The first tenet of the American dream actually says that everyone can participate equally. Of course, the first tenet is clearly false, because it didn't take on until the 1960s, in which the women suffrage movement actually led to a lot of more women rights, as in the right for them being allowed to vote. It wasn't until the 1960s also for the blacks to gain rights, just civil rights, to live and not be oppressed anymore with the Jim Crow laws that they faced after slavery. The second tenet was reasonable anticipation of success, meaning that with enough resources you can actually achieve what you need to achieve. This is of course hypocritical again, because of you had all these systemic disadvantages being placed on a certain group of people that would stop your advancement. The third tenet being that from your own actions you can achieve success. It's very hard to actually achieve this without there being any resources for you to work with. What is the value of going hard when you have nothing in front of you and making something out of nothing? Not to say that it's impossible, because it's definitely been done, but in this case it's practically zero. You're not gonna get anything, and all of these things were brought out in Singleton's book in 2011 called the Great American Nightmare. I'll link that into the description below. Nonetheless though, all this in mind, it's very hard to bring forth an identity forward. It's very hard to stand by a certain identity or stand by a certain ideology without accepting fully what the nation is, or without accepting fully the history and as well its present realities. This is what's causing the dissonance within the people, which is what's causing the identity crisis that the woman was going through early on in Blood. Now, Kendrick Lamar has produced a masterpiece of an album, and XXX is the crux of this discussion today. It's not all doom and gloom, because America was always the people before it became a place. That's what Kendrick Lamar is trying to remind us of. He's trying to get us to think about ourselves, to think about the values that we share, to see if we can have a common value, because there is one uniting thing about America. There is one thing that does unite America, which is its constitution and the American dream. However, because of the realities that's facing the country, it's very hard to do that. It's very hard to actually look into these dreams and actually believe it. It's very hard to look into the Constitution and I believe that it applies to you. I believe that Kendrick is trying to say, if you're an American citizen, ask yourself, am I doing my best to live up to those values? The idea that this poses is that America can always improve as a nation. It is not a country that's going to be receiving amnesia in any time soon, because its history is apparent and its realities is even more apparent. So what this suggests is America is still the same person, that the people just need to remember their uniting values. So what this seems to be is a call to arms to unite as a nation, whilst looking within ourselves rather than put blame on a nation that wouldn't exist without the people. Thank you so much for checking out this review. I'm curious to know your thoughts in the comment section below. Did you like it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Make sure you press the thumbs up button, share this video, make sure you like this video as well. And yeah, just let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section. Did I butcher it again? But yeah, I am working on the next review as we speak. I'm going to be looking at Pride in a lot closer detail to see what that allegory is talking about in regards to the whole album. But yeah, I am kind of sad to bring this video to a close. But yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Peace.